Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a professional podcaster and YouTuber hailing all the way from Utah in the United States. His name is Landin Vallejos. Welcome to the
Vallejos,
show.
either works.
Vallejos.
So there's Vallejos or there's Vallejos. There's a few different ways.
How do
How
you say it?
When I'm at work, I say Vallejos because
Vallejos.
professional. But when I'm just with casual, I'm like Vallejos. I don't know. Depends on my mood.
Yeah, I don't know. We were just saying off camera just then that there's like a lot of different names you go by, and I just want to talk about this. So you've got this nickname, Landini Linguini, which is what's the deal with this name? Where does this come from?
So this name, it came from my friend. One day he's like, "Yo, I got this nickname for you, and it's Landini Linguini," and I'm like, "That is gold." And I liked it so much, I was like, "Oh, okay, let's make a YouTube for it. Let's put all my usernames on video games for it." And yeah, so that's all it really was. My friend was just like, "Landini Linguini," and I'm like, "Yes, you are on something right there."
Of course, one of the things that's related to that is you do a podcast called Linguini's Dough. What can you tell us about this show? What's the deal behind this podcast?
So the deal behind this podcast, Linguini's Dough, it originates off of the name Landini Linguini, as you can kind of tell. When I started, there's different phases through the podcast. Right now, I'm in a phase with it right now, but at the beginning when I started it, I was bottling up my emotions. So I'm like, hey, let's see, this would be a good way for me to practice getting my feelings out. And I listened to a bunch of podcasts at the time. So it was just like, two and two together, started a podcast. And at first it was just by myself. I didn't think I could get any guests on at the time. And yeah, so I usually would just talk about whatever. And it's also a big metaphor. So linguini's dough, you know how you can make bread, pizza. What else can you make with dough? Bunch of other stuff. Same thing with topics. I can really talk about anything. So it's just a big metaphor, which is why I chose it. And yeah, so that's where the name kind of came from. From there, though, one of my friends, I've actually never met him in real life, online friends. He's like, "Yo, I want to be on the podcast." And I'm like, "All right, let's do it." And from there, that kind of built me up. And I'm like, "Oh, I can get guests. It's not that hard. You just ask them." And that's when I started getting more guests on and all this fun stuff. And soon I'll be having 20 separate guests. So I've had multiple people on different times, but 20 separate people as guests, which will be a cool accomplishment. Anyway, so then the next phase of my podcast became a productivity podcast because I feel like I could talk about that for quite a long time. I do these 30-day challenges. It consists of just whatever. Sometimes, like I've done twice, I've done it where I put my computer screen and my phone screen in black and white. Very miserable to do, but it was very interesting. Oh my. Okay, sorry. But yeah, it was very interesting. I don't know, not doing it again now that I've done it twice, but basically, yeah, for a month I put those in black and white. I've done social media detoxes.
Oh, let's back up. What did you learn from doing that? So when you say black and white, as in like a filter or something? Like what exactly are you talking about there?
So each device is different, right? But
okay,
on Windows, I forget where it's in, but there's a setting you can make. It makes everything in black and white. So if you're watching a YouTube video or if you're editing a video.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And to be honest, when you first start doing it, it kind of increases your productivity. But by the end, you just get used to it. And it's like a normal computer, except it's just, you dread it because it's so stale. There's nothing interesting about it. When I did finish the challenge, I learned how much I love the color blue. Just from, I don't know how to explain it, but blue feels different after you have that black and white for that period of time.
Okay.
So that one, I don't know how much I actually learned. I learned that it doesn't make you more productive, but I don't know. It made me want to procrastinate using my device because the black and white was so, I didn't enjoy it, which made me not want to do the work on it.
Okay.
So that was just kind of a trial experiment, and it's it was just fun to do, you know?
So you mentioned before that you're doing these phases. So I guess now the podcast. So it started with you kind of just talking about certain thoughts and feelings on your mind and stuff. So I suppose kind of like almost like a diary of sorts in a way. And now you're moving through shifts of phases, which is pretty interesting. So is this like a testing phase? Then you're trying to kind of test all aspects of your life and try to learn different things from that. Is that kind of what we're going for?
Uh Kind of. The one thing, so before I did this podcast, let's see, I think it was a year before I did this podcast, I had a stop motion animation, which for those that don't know, you take a picture, you move the subject just a tiny bit, you take a picture, you put it all together, and you have a animation. You made Legos move. So I used to have, oh my goodness, sorry.
This is one busy guy, guys.
Yeah. I don't have a webcam on my desktop, so I have to use my laptop, and I don't use it as much. But no, so I lost my train of thought. No, so it's not a testing phase just because. Oh, sorry. So I had an animation channel, right? I got burnt out. I realized I didn't enjoy it as much as I used to. And when I officially said, like, I'm not doing this channel anymore, I was like, I don't want to ever create content again and have it become like a chore. It's one reason I won't go into the video industry as a profession, is because I would get that creative drought doing those type of things for clients. And
what killed your interest? Like, why did you suddenly not enjoy it?
so I was doing these weekly animations. They're about probably 10 seconds long. At the time, I mean, yeah, they were kind of a lot of work. They weren't that fulfilling since they're only 10 seconds. It was good for the algorithm because it was a consistent upload, but they weren't that good of uploads. Then after that, me and my friend, we were working on a project called Battle for He did most of the script editing because that's not something I'm hugely fond of doing. I mean, it's a very important aspect, but I'm not. I'm like, you can do that part. I'll do the animating and editing. Either way, we just ended up putting on too much work, and at first there was only just me and him as the voice actors, and we decided that, hey, this is. I decided because he's a good voice actor. He's got that deep voice, and he's a military, so he is a great voice actor, and I was like, hey, we need more variety, so I'm gonna try and go get more voice actors. And I did go and get a few more. I redid my lines because at the time I was in, I don't know, when I did the recording, I think it was 2018. My voice was higher pitched and it was kind of, yeah. So I decided, I'm like, okay, let's redo the voices, and then we'll just work our way into it. And I finished the prologue, so it was going to be a prologue plus 6 episodes. And I finished the prologue, and it turned out fantastic. I'm not even gonna lie, that's one of my most proud projects. But I'd go to school and I'd just work on that, and it just burnt me out, and I lost the passion for it. And animating, it just takes so much time. You can't do an animation quick.
Do you think you'll ever get into it in a different way in the future? Maybe it's just particular medium is not interesting to you anymore, but you might I mean, you did mention before you're not interested in going to the video industry, but I mean, how many different styles have you tried,
Yeah, I know just Blender, that's something, or because after I burn out from that, I actually did start trying more digital animation because I like being in an office setting.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't look like an office, but it is. And I like that space. I work in an office environment. And I was like, maybe that's what it is. Because when I was doing the stop motions, I had to, my back would be hunched over, and I'm it was just kind of uncomfortable. And I was like, maybe that's what it is. It's just not in a comfortable aspect. And at the time I had these tiny tables that my mom, she used to own a preschool, and there were some old tables from there, and oh my goodness, they're horrible. And then there's set design. There was just so much that went into it. So yes, I can see myself in the future potentially uh, doing it in just in another fashion, I guess. Because it's not like I still watch animations more than I do live action movies. Like just last night, I finished watching What If. Um,
Ooh, what do you think?
so the last two episodes actually made me really like the show. Up
Mm,
until that point, I was like, I don't know. And then those last two episodes, I'm like, so this is pretty good. This is kind of crazy. Um,
it's interesting
I,
how it all comes together, isn't it?
yeah,
I wasn't
I
expecting that either.
was like, oh, hey. But yeah, so I really do appreciate animations. And let's see, there's some of my favorites would include Wally, Into the Spider-Verse.
That one
Uh,
is tremendous all
it
round.
is, I've watched it so many times. What else? I don't know. I just watch a lot of animations because I have that passion for it, and I'm like, oh, this is a lot of work. Um, I really don't think I'll be going into like animation as a career, but I do think I'll eventually force myself. I'll get bored and I'll force myself to kind of learn more digital animation, and really, I think 3D rendering is where I've hit a roadblock because it's just once I learn the program, I'll get into it and I'll be like, ooh, Blender, all these 3D things you can do and whatever it is. But up until that point, I have to actually force myself to learn it. And that's been hard to find the energy.
I get that, man. I get that. It's good that you're trying a lot of different things. I just want to talk a little bit more about the podcast before we get onto your kind of career and stuff and what you're looking into doing. So, what would you say you've sort of learned through podcasting so far? I mean, how long have you been doing it now?
So January 2022 will be 2 years. So
Hey,
just under 2 years, which is cool.
excellent.
Uh, yeah. And honestly, I've learned a lot. It's hard to just pinpoint exactly. First of all, I learned that because I'm pretty young, I was in high school when I started it. And I was really insecure and didn't have a lot of confidence at that time. And once I got that first guest, I'm like, oh, I can do this. People like, because I used to think like nobody cares for me, and all
Mm,
those negative thoughts, and just by having guests, and it's like, oh, people are really cool. Like just having a discussion is a pretty cool thing, and yeah, so there's that, and just it's kept me consistent with one thing because I do like to make videos, but sometimes I don't like to do that. So then I'd have months where I just didn't do anything, and this would be the one thing I did because at first it was just a once a month upload schedule, and yeah. The other things I've learned, I forgot. I should have. I don't know. I've learned how to listen more. Because
mm.
um, I used to be like, I'd always be like, yeah, like this is what I always say. I used to when I'd listen to someone, I'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know what you mean. When you scrutinize, especially with podcasting, obviously you have to sit and edit and go back through everything that you've done, and then you just pick up on all these little things that you do, and you're like, oh, I hate that. Oh, I can't be doing that anymore.
Yeah, it's so real. It's like, oh my goodness, and then you do it again, and you're like,
Yeah.
crap. um,
But yeah, you're
but
onto
that
something though with the whole conversational aspect. Like, I mean, I didn't even notice this until probably 6 months in, but I think it's so important to be a good listener as a podcaster for obvious reasons. But like, I can't count how many podcasters I've come across, especially ones whose shows I've been invited to appear on, and it's like they just like interrupt you, you know. Like they
Mhm.
don't. If I ask you a question, I'm going to sit and listen, and I'll only really interject if I want to ask you a follow up, or if maybe if I want to steer the conversation a different way. But still, then I still want you to finish the point because A, that's just polite. It's rude to interrupt, and B, I don't know. It kind of just shows like you're not interested, you're not engaged, or whatever, and it just sucks. I think, and also I think I used to think a lot about what the podcast actually sounds like when you're listening to it. You know, like what's the kind of the flow of the podcast, if you know what I mean. So it's I don't know, listening is so key in that. And also just bringing it back to the point, you know, in general conversation, like I can't count how many, because I prefer to listen and not talk, to be honest, in every situation, because you learn, you know, you're just repeating information when you're talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't especially like the sound of my own voice. I just, you know, whatever. But I don't know. I think it's with the podcast, you kind of really are forced to exercise both sides. And you get some guests that are more talkative and you just have to steer that. And other times you've got to be the source of the conversation. And I don't know, it's very, I don't know about how you feel, but I get very like tired afterwards if it's a particularly intense discussion, or if I've had to think quite intensely. I mean, I don't know, every episode is different, but like when I'm actually doing it, I'm thinking about several things at once, and it's tricky. It's not easy.
It is. I always appreciate when the podcaster that I'm guesting is one of those people that can just talk for just the whole episode. Essentially, I'm like, thank you.
Sometimes so that you don't have to talk, basically.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
a quiet person. I podcast for some reason though.
I hear that, man. It's weird. It's weird. Like the amount of times I've told people, because I do live streams as well away from this, and people were surprised to learn that I'm a quiet guy in real life. And it's like, yeah, but you have to understand, this is a message to everyone that doesn't understand this. The difference is you're talking to a camera, or you're talking in a medium such as this, and there's like less pressure, you know, like we'll do this podcast for an hour, maybe two, whatever, and then there's no pressure to have to talk past that point, you know. Whereas if you're in a room with someone, it's like this air is sitting on you and you just feel like, oh, I have to say something, but do I have to say something? Because we could be quiet, but then I don't know, because I can kind of feel their mood, sort of, but then maybe I'm just overthinking, and it's just and that's what it's like to be in.
Well, then you end up asking how the weather's in that silence.
So, well, I mean, I don't know. As you get older, I think for me, I've kind of. How old are you? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm 18. So.
18, yeah. So I'm 10 years older than you, 28, and I can safely say that the major difference, I think, is that you do learn that it's okay to be in a quiet situation. Like it's okay for there to be silence. Like small talk it's the devil's work, but at the same time, you can't anticipate how other people are going to react. That's the thing. Some people, particularly in the UK, I have to say it's a big thing here in the UK. People just can't be in the silence. Like they think something's wrong. Like I remember in my early 20s, I remember coming back from university, like maybe the beginning of the first year or second year, and I'd become a lot more quiet because I just began to change. I just, you know, not like I was excessively extrovert, but I guess my parents were used to me being more extroverted, outgoing. But as I've gotten older, I've just become, because I'm like I flip-flop, omnivert, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm able to do the extrovert things, but I prefer to be introverted. And as I've gotten older, I think I've realized, like, yeah, no, actually, conserve your energy, be quiet, save it for when it really matters. And because that's the thing with conversations. I mean, just because you talk doesn't mean that people are listening. And the worst thing is obviously when someone's not listening, you know, especially when you're talking about something you're passionate about. It's like, dagger in the heart. But it's like, I don't know, in those small moments when I do open up, just going back to the story, like with my parents, I just changed at that point. I just begun to just be quieter and, you know, eat in silence. And they genuinely thought something was wrong. They're like, is everything okay? Like, what's the problem? Why aren't you talking? And it's like, because I don't need to. There's nothing to say. Like,
yeah, let me just eat my food.
Let me eat my food in silence, please.
Breakfast is the one meal where I'm strictly, please do not talk to me. Close quarters. This is my silent meal.
Oh, dude, yeah. No, I mean, come on. It's like it's early in the fucking morning. Do you know what I mean? The last thing you want is just like, look, let me wake up first, because and then we can talk. Like, at least let me have my coffee first before you start blaring stuff in my face. It's like, or when you get the intense questions, it's like, so how is everything? How are things at work? And it's like,
I'm gonna go blank.
Just no.
Yeah. But that actually does remind me of a couple other things I did learn. That was how you phrase questions, because you don't say, did you do this or this? You say, why did you do this? And why didn't you do that? You got to phrase those questions so they keep the person talking, not just yes or no. And then, I learned a bunch of software. It made sound nicer. By software, I just mean like I use an app called Calendly, which they can schedule. Half the people don't like using it though, so that's hit or miss. And then what's the other one? I started using a calendar because I need to be like, oh, not available at those times. And yeah, I don't know. It's just I just take everything at one step at a time. So I learn, there's always something interesting about every person I talk to.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Although I do think the willingness to speak is a big factor in that. So while everyone does necessarily have something to offer, I mean, here's the thing. I think with podcasting, if you're guesting on a show or just getting involved in podcasting, you need to enjoy conversation, I think.
It's true. Yeah.
And I've had a few instances where it's been like, I ask questions and I get nothing. And I'm like,
what do I do?
Okay. Let's flip the script. Let's do something else. And it's like, if they don't want to be there, they don't want to be there. And it's like, all right.
I just recently had one of those because I haven't. Most of the people I've talked to, they do most of the talking, and sometimes I have to do a little bit more, but like nothing crazy. But recently, I just had this one guest, and I don't know. When I listened to it back, I was like, were my reactions kind of weak, or was what he said just so basic that? Because it was one of my shortest episodes. I think we recorded for 45 minutes. And I'm like, I don't know. I'll probably still release it just because I need to get it.
I had the exact same thing happen to me recently. I'm not going to specify because I don't want to give it away. But anyone listening, you know. What I will say is exactly the same thing. I came off of it thinking, should I publish this? Is this even worth listening to? And then I was like, no, maybe I'm being harsh. And then I listened back to it, and I did a few clips, and I realized that the clips were the only part of it that were worth listening to. And then I wondered, like, okay, because my first thing is to go, okay, well, I'm the host of this. I own this. So if it's bad, I own that too. I'm not going to blame my guest for that. And I felt really bad. And I reached out to my community and I said, for the people that listen, I said, hey, what do you guys think? Do you think did I mess up? Was this terrible, etc.? And they literally all said, no, it was your guest. They just didn't want to, they just didn't seem engaged in the conversation. And when I listened back another time, I was like, I heard it then, and I kind of felt it when the podcast was happening, but I really noticed it when I went back and I was like, yeah.
I don't know.
And but it just breaks my heart because it's like, why would you go on a podcast if you don't want to be like, you know what I mean? Like, and I remember getting halfway through and thinking like, should I just like end this now? Or like, I really had to think about whether or not I was going to publish that because I don't know, like the way you got to look at go on, no, I'll cut you off.
Oh yeah. If you're not going to listen to it yourself, it's like, why would I publish it? And I never even looked at it from your point of view where it's like, it's not the guest that made it bad. It's me. I'm the host. It's my show. So if I publish it, that's on me, which is an interesting take that I never looked at it.
It's because it's like, for me, every guest I have on this show, I do interview them. I've got questions here. I do research on every guest and I interview them. But I don't really want to interview per se. I do, but I want the conversation to go there. I want a discussion. I want a back and forth. I want tennis. That's what I want. But I don't care if it's like one-sided tennis. That's fine, as long as it's like, you know, they're leading and not me. Yeah, if it's just me going, hey, so what about this? Uh-huh. Okay. Wow, we're done already, are we? Okay. What about this? No,
The
nothing.
bathroom's over there.
You're giving me nothing, pal. You're giving me nothing. Come on,
Yeah,
you're leaving me hanging out. Please, come on. Just give me something, anything. Come on. But yeah. So if you haven't figured out which episode that is, yeah.
I listened to two pretty solid episodes. The guy with the PhD, and then the I think she did cosplays.
Oh, is this mine? Oh, is this you saying you listened to my podcast?
Oh yeah. Because I've listened to two of your episodes before I got on. Because I was like, gotta. Wow. That's the other thing. You got to know who you're talking to. You can't just. A lot of people try to get scheduled the next day.
Yeah, man. Do you know who you're talking to? I'm a big deal, pal. I'm just kidding.
But no, yeah, because they want to plug something,
right?
Which I don't think there's a high return for. Like, if I'm like, oh, go check out Linguini's Dough, chances are 90% of your viewers aren't going to go check it out, which I mean, I'm fine with. I gotta just have a chat.
You never know. You never know, actually, because I will say about my community, love you guys. They do go out of their way and they do check out the people and stuff. And this is one of the reasons why I do. I mean, I think as soon as I began doing all of this content stuff, because I do content elsewhere, not just podcasting, I realized I didn't just want to do one thing. You know, one of the reasons why I interview all sorts of people from different backgrounds is because the conversation's different every time. So every time anyone comes on this show, that's something different for my audience. And with my audience, you know, they have different interests themselves. So some episodes, maybe it's not for them. Other episodes, they love it and they go check out that person. And I see things like, oh, they're following that person now. That's cool. Or they're checking out their videos. And it does work. And I think that for me, it's all about the show. It's all about putting on good content. And that's the same when I go on other people's shows. Like, yeah, of course, you know, I'm there to promote myself, but I just don't believe that a good way of promoting yourself is to be like, hey, come check me out. Come do this thing. Go subscribe to this. It's like, no, give me a reason. Show me why I should care.
It's why sub for sub, which is one of my biggest pet peeves, or just, I think that's just something I did it when I was younger, but now I'm like, that is such a stupid thing. There's no engagement. It's not, you didn't build that audience. You got each other's audiences. So yeah, there's that. And I try to connect to people on LinkedIn after, like, I'll listen to some podcasts and I'll be like, like I connected with you on LinkedIn because, you know, I'm like, hey, you know, these are connections. And that's the other thing, you know, podcasting connections kind of there, different states, countries.
That's true. I get that.
But it's connections. And yeah, like you said, if people are interested and they go check it out, which I'm all for, because like that guy with the PhD, I really enjoyed his interview. And like weirdly enough, I went and found him on LinkedIn, and he was actually hard to find just because I think there was another name, someone with his, I don't know. He was kind of tricky to find, but I enjoy listening to him. He was really smart. The other thing I honestly find hard about podcasting is, because for you, it's like a different experience for every person you interview, which I really like. Right now, the issue with my podcast is I don't know what to put a niche on it as, because I did productivity, and then I recently switched to, because I was like, oh, there's literally no point in being productive if you're not happy. So
fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, so
good point.
So I brought it to, okay, let's talk about people's struggles or whatever they have to say, what's happened to them. And that's been really interesting. But then I'm like, okay, well, I also want to talk about people starting up businesses, people in crypto, and just all the stuff I'm interested in. But then it's hard to get to market. I know you have like a TikTok and Instagram. Actually, I never checked out your Instagram, but.
Oh, but see, dude, I'll interject there. Like, my podcast is something that And believe me, I do a lot of marketing for it,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And like I thought clips were going to be like, oh, this is it. Like one clip goes viral, I get loads of views, and it's happened. I've had clips that have got like 80,000 views or whatever, like on TikTok, and then nothing. Didn't grow. I didn't get in any followers. You know, it's so hard to get people to care, because that's one of the things you said in the beginning that I thought was very interesting, is that you said, oh, what's the point of doing this? You know, no one cares. And here's the thing. I've got a solid audience that listens to this show now. It's a small audience, but there's some people that care. And that is so valuable. People always talk about numbers. Like I had a sponsor reach out to me. I'll tell this story. So this is funny, right? Real quick.
Uh-huh.
So I had a sponsor reach out to me, and they reached out to me by email, and they're like, hey, Christian, we saw your views on YouTube, and, you know, we would like to sponsor you. You know, this is a good opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. And then I said, well, this is what I'll offer. You can have placement in this episode, blah, blah, blah. There'll be audio version, there'll be video version. And here's my rate. And they were like, oh, okay, that's great. Yeah, so can you send us your stats for your podcast? And I'm thinking, so you've reached out to me and you've said that you want to sponsor me. But now this is turned into me pitching to you, right? So I painstakingly sent them screenshots, because I mean, the podcast is hosted on Anchor, which means it gets spread everywhere. I've got like a portal which shows you, you know, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and it's pretty good. It's a good rundown. You've got like your age demographics, gender demographics, the devices that people use. You know, it's good. It's a good little tool. But it's split, because obviously the YouTube stuff is completely different and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I glance at it every now and again, because my audience stays the same at the moment. So until it gets big numbers and changes, it's not really worth looking at right now. But I sent all this stuff over. Radio silence.
Ah, the ghost.
Nothing. And then I was just like, why did you bother? Like, it kind of just pissed me off, to be honest. It was just like, what is this?
Why? They should have started with the asking the stats.
Yeah, but even then, okay, so don't forget, they'd said, hey, you know, we want to do this. It's not like I reached out to them, because this is why I don't pitch for sponsorships, because I know that if I send them stats like I did with this company, they're going to be like, oh, that's nothing. Like, he's only got like 10, 15 people each episode. You know, who cares about that? You know, that's probably their mindset, probably. Which I think is dumb, because to be honest, you could easily have 1,000 people watching your show every week, and like none of them care to check out the products, versus 10, 15 committed people who, because don't forget, like it's the same thing. It's like they trust in you. So whatever you promote on that show, they'll probably go check that out. Or, you know, if for what I was saying before, you know, people coming on this show, they'll go check that person out. So there's like a sense of trust and loyalty from the listeners into me. And that's what I would try and push if they gave me an opportunity, but they didn't. So bringing it back to just in general, the whole conversation about marketing for podcasts and stuff. I mean, I don't know, like I'm in a growing stage where I'm growing on these platforms, but it's back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. Like I've been stuck at like under 800 followers on Instagram forever. I lose more followers than I gain. TikTok, we got loads of views and follows, but now it's stagnated and it's back to being dead. And my focus has shifted. I've gone back and forth from like being miserable about it to not caring about it to kind of my point now, which is I'm just trying to create the best stuff that I can create and find work and try to do this for a living one day. But I'm not really focused on the numbers anymore. Like I glance at them, but I think if you chase that too much, it just becomes a thing that defines you, and then it affects the content. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is always the content. No matter how successful or unsuccessful you are, it all comes down to what you're putting out there.
Yeah, it's without good content, no one's gonna, like, you can have all the viewers, but if your content's not even good, they're not gonna care to come back. So they might see it once and be like, oh yeah, no, that wasn't good, and move on. Or the engagement will just stay super low, which isn't fulfilling for me, that's just not fulfilling when it's like nobody cares. For me, a lot, I know in person, I know a lot of people that know about my podcast, but they haven't listened to it. But I feel like I've done a good job at making it noticed how I brand it, and they're like, oh, you run that podcast or whatever. I also have business cards. So
wow, damn, well, fair play. Fair play. He's got business cards. There you go. There you go. There you go.
They were honestly pretty nice. So yeah. And what was the other thing that oh, TikTok. So one thing I've read about TikTok's algorithm actually is when people like they're new to it, they'll oftentimes have a video that goes viral. Me and my brother, a couple years back, we made a TikTok. It got like 3 million views. He deleted his TikTok account, but it got like 3 million views. And after that, his views never really quite reached the same, unless he had a dead dog. Not real, but he wanted to get viral for a little bit, and you know, sometimes he said his dog died, and I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
But yeah, so yeah, I just agree. If you're not making good content, you're just looking at those analytics every day, you're just gonna kill your why you even started it. Although I do know a lot of people that they start social media just for the sake of, oh, this is gonna be my full-time job, and it's like, I don't like to say it can't. There's a reason it's the top 1% in my eyes, because you have to work hard for it. And
yeah, that's the thing. Hard work doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's people that do this for years and years and years and years and just get nowhere.
Yeah, part of it's luck too.
I think a bigger percentage of it is luck. I mean, every single major successful person that I've read about or heard about, especially with social media, always says, oh, well, it's the hard work. You just got to keep grinding, putting in the hard work. And it's like, well, I've been grinding for 2 years and I've barely got a lot to show for it, man. So it's really not just about the grinding. It's about, do you know what I mean? It's about the luck and who you know and opportunities and stuff like that.
Yeah, shout outs. I do not like them because, I mean, if you get a shout out, hey, you get a lot of followers. A lot of them aren't as engaged. I guess with podcasting, if they go out of your way to go find your podcast, it'll be a good follower. But I know with YouTube, if you get a shout out, it can actually kill your channel.
What?
However, so like I said, on my old channel, I reached 356 subscribers on that. And this one, because I was really good at connecting with small creators, and literally I would go on one person's channel and I'd see that they mentioned this other creator I follow, and vice versa. It was pretty cool in my opinion. But either way, I got shout outs every now and then. And one time it was from this channel that had, I don't remember how many subscribers he had, but he was doing well and I got quite a few subscribers. However, most of their engagement was just saying, oh, good video, yada, yada. And then after a while, they just disappeared, and it just hurt my views. It hurt the ratio between subscribers and viewers. I think a collab is the proper way to do a shout out. I think just direct shout outs, I don't feel like they're good for your overall health of your channel, because it can kill engagement. It's the same thing with why I don't think going viral is good, because you get viral for that one thing. You either have to do that one thing forever on, or you have to mix it up and find some way to keep them engaged. And that's hard.
I had a similar thing. I had a video get 2.9 million views on TikTok, and it was a stitch. It was just a silly little thing that I did. But the thing is, I do stuff like that all the time, like silly voices, silly reactions, whatever. Like, it's a multi-content thing. And I just look at it as luck. I really do. I think you can never predict what's going to get loads of views. Sometimes I think it's timing. You know, like I did a little video the other day. You know, the Salt Bay guy. Yeah, the guy that he's like, okay, so he's this chef in he's from Turkey, and he got famous for basically it sounds really dumb, but like he would like cook steaks, and his process is pretty cool, like the way he does it and everything. He takes a lot of care. He's like, you know, holding the meat, almost like cradling it, doing all this like interesting stuff with like tongs and stuff. And then at the end of the video, he'd like sprinkle kind of like that, some salt like that, and that's where that comes from. It's like a big meme. Anyway, recently he set up a restaurant in London, and he's charging extortionate amounts of money. So like there's a YouTuber that kind of exposed this, where they made the same, they cooked and prepared the meals that he was charging for like £65, and he charges like $7,000 for the meal and the experience. Yeah.
Is he at least putting the little gold, whatever you call
Yeah,
it?
no, he does that. I mean, these rich people come into this restaurant, and they want to be like dazzled and entertained. And like, I saw this video the other day where it's happening, and there's a guy sitting there, right? I hate to pick on this guy, but I am going to pick on this guy. So he's sitting there like this, looking really smug, watching Salt Bae do his thing in front of him, like this. He's wearing a fucking hat in a restaurant. Take your fucking hat off, man. Don't wear a hat in a restaurant. Have you never seen The Sopranos? Come on. Don't, just have some respect. I don't know who raised this guy, but I just want to say that now. Just don't wear a hat indoors.
Take it off.
Yeah, take that hat off. Show some respect. But anyway, he's sitting there. I just wanted to rant about that. But he's sitting there like this, and he's watching the guy, Salt Bae, do his thing. And I'm just, everyone's kind of laughing about and saying like, oh, Salt Bae is charging too much money. This is extortion. And it's like, look, those people are paying for it. They've chosen that. They don't have to pay that. They don't have to go there. And I think it says a lot about, I don't think Salt Bae is doing anything wrong. Look, he's got a really expensive restaurant in London. It's expensive to have a restaurant there, just like it would be in like New York in the United States. You have a place there. It's going to cost a lot to be there. So you're probably going to either have to do lots of deals and just hope you get a lot of volume, or you have to charge a lot of money and make it like a specialist place. Those are your two options in a place like that. And so he's charging based on experience. Everyone knows you can do this stuff for cheaper, but it's the experience. It's the artistry,
the music,
the ambiance. But it's literally him doing his thing. That's what people are paying for. And I do understand where people are coming from. Oh, it's extortion, blah, blah, blah. But look, those rich people are paying for it. They choose to pay for it. They're happy with it. That's what it is. It's just a fad, and there'll be another thing, will come along, and it's just what happens. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Those rich people are definitely not complaining, except for maybe the guy with the hat.
I completely forgot why I raised. I'm sorry. I'm just like engaged in our conversation. The reason I raised that is that he was trending on Twitter. Yeah. So I posted a video that I'd already posted on Instagram. With a filter, and it's just a silly video where it's just like Salt Bae laughing as he's taking your money, ha ha ha, And I posted it on Twitter because I saw that Salt Bae was trending, and boom, it got like 15K, and it got some retweets and stuff like that. So that was an example of perfect timing. So when you see something trending, you hop on the trend, but it doesn't always work that way either,
Yeah. Another good example, I've never done this, but I think I have this phone, the one that goes like that.
Ooh.
It's fancy. Yeah.
Is that Samsung? Samsung?
Yeah, it's Samsung.
That's the new one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I've seen the adverts. What? Oh,
my friend sent me the GIF, and I'm like, but no, because I don't know, I pre-ordered a version that took an extra month to ship. If I would have made like an impressions video when this first released, though, I could have probably got something with a decent amount of views. So like you said, a little bit of timing plus luck, it can get you a tweet with 15K likes. So. Yeah,
I think it is unpredictable. Though. My point is with this is that there are other factors, but mostly it's unpredictability. For example, that video that I got that went viral, it went viral in the Middle East. Like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Algeria, countries like that. And I don't know how. I think it just kind of, maybe someone thought it was funny, they shared it, and then it virality is based on that, isn't it? It's just sharing upon sharing upon sharing upon sharing it in a quick kind of fashion. But my point is that I don't think you can always really predict or tap into what people are going to relate to or find funny or whatever. I think sometimes it just strikes a nerve with people. You know, I was watching something the other day where they were talking about how sometimes music, when it becomes big because it kind of hits at a time that connects with everything else at that particular time. And the reason it's big is because it's big at that moment, if that makes sense. So it's like, you think about like a particular record when it gets released and it becomes either genre defining or moment defining. Like I think of like the 90s with albums like I don't know, Nirvana's Nevermind, or maybe some of the stuff by The Verve in the UK. Like it was released at that time, and I think that it just struck a chord with people because of life back then and the vibes and everything. It just hit at the right time when it was supposed to. Because people forget, like you take Nirvana as an example, there were loads of grunge bands. There'd been loads of grunge bands in the 80s, but for whatever reason, grunge became really popular and I suppose mainstream in the 90s. And there were plenty of other bands that did it, you know, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, etc. But Nirvana, I think, somehow tapped into like the public consciousness at that time, and they just, you know, same way the Beatles did it, same way countless other artists have done it, where they kind of almost defined a generation and a moment in time. And I mean, even with them, it passed. You know, they had their moment. I think with Nevermind, they had their moment, a couple of years, top of the world. And then by the time they released their follow-up in Utero, some of that kind of, how can you put it? Some of that success began to wane, but not like in a massive way that they didn't stop being successful or something. But like, it wasn't as big as when Nevermind came out. And it was also by design. They wanted to make a record that kind of would kill off some of that and kind of bring them back to basics. And yeah, that's why in Utero it's such an experimental kind of album that almost sounds more like their earlier work. But yeah, I don't know. I just went on a rabbit hole there. But
no, yeah, but I think you're completely right, because I mean the timing literally, like the world was like, oh, we need. I don't know those songs. Like I know the Beatles, but I don't listen to a lot of music, so I understand what you're saying. But yeah, it's that timing. It's the world's like, oh, this is what we needed to hear at the moment, and they start sharing it, and soon enough it's viral for a little bit, and then slowly it was Nirvana. Slowly they have to switch their song to find something else that fits, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, it's like certain bands I've seen over the years that like Green Day is a really good example, and we've shit on Green Day before on this podcast. I actually like them, but I think that they, past a certain point, they stopped being what they were. And it's natural. All bands cannot continue to be at the very top. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter how much marketing is out there, how much efforts are put into keeping them at the top. At the end of the day, it's the will of the people that make or break you. Do you know what I mean? Like if you take something like Joe Rogan's podcast as a good example. I use this often as an example. His podcast is not like continually always at the top in the news. I mean, you know what I mean? Like he'll have certain guests that will bring it back into consciousness, or he'll say something particularly controversial. But his moment of like, you know, being the most talked about thing, at least in the podcasting world, has kind of been and gone. Like he's still, don't get me wrong, he's still at the very top, but it's just like there was that moment and then it passed and then you move on and you keep going. And that's the thing, like musicians never stop releasing records, you know, like I think about a band like Franz Ferdinand here in the UK. They released their record with the song Take Me Out, and they kept releasing music after that. And I think they even still do. But they just had that moment, and that was the moment, and then you move on.
and they now have that build it up. They've built up some audience that they get to keep from that, but yeah, they're not going to be nearly as viral.
Yeah,
From that moment.
but I think this is a very important point as well. Like, people have to stop. Doesn't matter what field you're in either. I think you have to stop being obsessed with this idea of being like, I hear this term a lot on YouTube, like relevancy, or they're not relevant anymore. They're not relevant. And it's like, if that's your goal, is to stay relevant constantly, I mean, that's a bad thing. That's sick. That's not a good thing
It'll
to
be
try and
exhausting.
change. Yeah, like, it's okay to not be the public center of attention 24/7, you know. And it's like, I never used to really properly or grasp the idea of 15 seconds of fame or 15 minutes of fame, but now I totally get it. It's like, okay, this is a moment, enjoy it, it won't last, and people move on. Because it's amazing when you think about it, just think about this. Think about the stuff that you were into like last year, or like stuff that was in the news last year. When you think back now, you're like, wow, that seems like an age ago. Like, that's no one even talks about it. No one even remembers that. And it's like, because that's all people care about, is what's going on right in this second. That's why, for instance, I never sit on things that I've done. Like, yeah, I had that video that went viral a while back, but that was then.
We're talking about now, the present.
Yeah, like
it will eventually become the past.
Exactly. You know, it's like, I remember one time I was playing a pool game and I won 6 games, but I lost the 7th. And there's a guy giggling who's not playing, and I'm like, what? I still beat the guy 6 times. And he's like, yeah, but you lost the last game. And I was like, what? And then he cheekily says, you're only as good as your last game.
Wow.
And that's the thing, like, obviously it was banter and it was just mucking around, but he was right. That advice, it stuck with me. And I think he only said that as like a way of just kind of like trying to get to me and take the piss out of me. But it was wise advice that applies to everything. People only care about the latest thing you've done. Doesn't matter that you did this thing 3 years ago that you're proud of. Great, but that was then. This is now. You've got to live in the moment.
What was I going to say? I forgot. I lost my train of thought. But just piggybacking off, focusing on what you do now versus what you did in the past. Like, I used to make animations. I'm not nearly as good as that now. For my whole podcast, the whole thing I did was like, I will focus on one thing at a time. Like, I'll have long-term goals, but I won't look at those very often. I'll look at one thing at a time. I'll see some episodes did better in the past. I'll focus on the next episode that I find interesting to make. All to just keep this cycle so that it's not exhausting, but I am improving, and it's a good balance. That's really cool that guy, just something so simple from pool ended up being so revolutionary.
Yeah, it's funny how certain things that people say to you in life can stick with you. I think when your ears are open, you're really listening to people, and something that you need to hear comes into your life at the time you need to hear it, and it just makes an impression on you, I guess.
And they'll have no idea sometimes. Most times, probably, actually.
Let's move it forward. I want to talk a little bit about your I want to talk about your career aspirations.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, what do you want to do with your life?
To retire.
But seriously, I mean, you've got this podcast. You said that you've dabbled with animations and you go back and forth in it. But what do you really want to do? Like, what's the ambition? What's the drive? What's pushing you? Well, where do you want to go?
So for a career, this has been one of the things that's been most difficult in my life. Not too much. Well, kind of, just at times. To start, let's just start. So I got my first job just last year, January of 2020. I was working at McDonald's, and I worked there till April of this year. My last 2 months there, I became a manager, and I hated it, so I quit. And I was like, I'm gonna quit, not work for 2 months. And then on my second to last day, I got offered a job from a customer at an insurance brokerage. So I still work there right now. He's a really good guy. I do wish the pay was a little bit better, but it'll suffice. But in high school, I honestly had no idea what I was going to do for my future. So I just avoided thinking about it, avoided anything. Like I told you earlier in this episode, I'm like, hey, I'm not doing video as my video, or what's the other thing? I guess audio. Because I've considered, like, before I started podcasting, I was editing. I was just shortening a podcast for one of my friends for like $20 a week. And he was working for someone. He just didn't like that part. So he paid me, which was nice. But that's besides the point. I I just feel like those creative ones, having those as a full-time job, unless they're for projects you got to work on yourself, that it would be exhausting. Like you'll get very good. Like I have a friend, he does skateboarding, he does these edits, he takes these photos. They're amazing. But I feel like if I was doing it for clients, I would get exhausted so quick. And I've done a few gigs here and there. Like I helped film a wedding for my brother-in-law. I've done a couple photo shoots for graduation, church events, just stuff like that. And I mean, I didn't despise it, no, but I'm not like, oh, this was my favorite thing I've ever filmed. The money was nice. And I was like, I have a skill in this. I'll do it. But so I do like messing around with computers. Right beside me, I have my computer I built.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yeah, you want to see it? It's right there.
That's it.
Whee!
Damn.
I don't know how much you can see it. Very worth it. But that's besides the point. So I'm like, I like computers. It's not something I dread, not something that's so amazing I'd get burnout at it for going too hard at it. So recently, I've been looking, I'm like, okay, so I need to make more than $30,000 a year around what I currently make. And what would be the best way to go about this? So I looked at the different careers and I'm like, well, I could become licensed in insurance, sell insurance if I got enough clients. Some of my coworkers, they make good money doing it. But I'm like, would that be so fulfilling? I want to do it. Because I mean, I'm the CSR, I take the calls, and it's tolerable. It's all right. I don't think I'd want to do that for the rest of my life. I mean, obviously you can change your career at any moment, but I don't think I'd want to really do that for a good portion of my life. So I'm like, well, I might get licensed, try getting a few clients to help save up some money. But that's out of the picture. So the other careers I was looking at there's IT. What were the other ones that I looked at? Most of the time I just kind of gave up every career I saw. I'm like, oh, I don't like that idea. So I don't remember the exact ones I looked at, but so recently I was like, okay, I'm going to try AT. And with IT, a lot of the times what you can do is you can get a few certificates. You can start in a help desk job and work your way up. However, there's some limits with that with pay, and I don't know exactly. I'm not in IT. And then the other option is go to college, and I'm in the US, so our college is expensive, and high school me did not have the brain power to be like, oh, let's actually prepare for college. I did graduate high school January of this year, so a semester early. However, I'd never applied for scholarships. I took one concurrent enrollment class, which is basically college credit. And then the test, I think it's called an SAT. I don't remember. I didn't study for that. I didn't care for it, and I got a 15 on it. So on some ends, I have to figure out how basically any sort of loan. Well, I'm going to save up for community college for the first 2 years. That I should be able to afford. It's not too bad. It's the university, the last 2 years to get the bachelor's. That's going to be I'll probably have to take out loans, which I hate, but it will be worth it to be making more than $30,000 a year. So yeah, I'm going to probably save up for those 2 years of community college. And then those last 2 years, I'll probably have to take out a loan or two, probably more than that. But I'm looking at possibly, I'll probably get it's called the A+ certificate. I'll probably get that before I start college. And I don't know. I'll just have to see. I have to learn how any loans, grants, whatever that stuff is. I never learned about it in high school because I'm like, oh, I don't have a future. And now I'm like, oh crap, I want a future and I want a career I want a career. And IT, if you get up there, it pays very well. So that's one other nice thing. So yeah, I'll quit my rambling on here now.
No, no, not at all. It's not rambling. It's refreshing. I think you're kind of open to lots of different options, and you've got like a clear understanding of, okay, this is my goal, at least initially. This is what I need to do, and I just need to get, okay, if it's A to B, I've got to figure out how to get to B, and there's different ways I can do that. And I don't know, it's refreshing. I mean, I don't know, you sound much more clued up than I was when I was 18. I don't know what the fuck I was doing. So I'm an intelligent young man. That's good.
Just gotta fake it, Just kidding. The other thing is, I do want to try actually retiring early. That's one of my goals, and I consider myself a fairly frugal person. Mm-hmm. I do make a few kind of expensive impulse purchases here and there, but I'm better at it than I used to. Like in high school, I'm like, I'm in high school, I won't have this opportunity where I don't have this many bills. And I like, most people recognize this mic. It's expensive. It depends on your voice. I'll be honest here. Like I kind of have a higher voice, like kind of deep, kind of high. So it's not perfect. Anyways, that's besides the point. In high school, I was a very impulsive purchaser. Then I moved on to after high school, and it was kind of like that. And then now I'm pretty good about it. Every now and then, like this phone, I dropped it. This phone was brilliant. That phone wasn't the smartest decision, and but I'm getting better at it. Like I use an app called YNAB. It's pretty fantastic. Stands for You Need a Budget.
Oh,
so
cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so just probably going into IT and hopefully retiring early. We'll see. Hopefully, I'm gonna do what I can do to get towards that. Other than that, that's as far as I've thought of for my career at the moment.
Best of luck, man. I'm sure you'll smash it. It's a good sign that you got, like I said, you're clued up at this point. I think that can only mean a good thing long term. Now I've got to ask. You work in insurance and you worked in McDonald's. Do you have any crazy stories? Because CSR, customer service representative, right?
Yes.
Right. So let's focus on insurance firstly. What are some of the crazy stories or things that stick out in your memory from your time working there?
So hopefully she won't listen to this. She doesn't. Well, I don't know if she speaks English. So I don't know Spanish. I only know English, unfortunately.
No names.
This is one customer.
No names. Keep it.
Yeah, no names.
Yeah.
I'm not about that. But this is one customer. I think she has. This is kind of deep. I think she has bipolar or some sort of.
Okay.
Something of the sort. Essentially, she comes in, she needs to make a payment, for example, and she could be there. Sometimes she'll be there for 10, 20 minutes. Other times she'll be there for a couple hours.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, she'll just talk from one thing to the next. And just recently I was in my boss's office and he was actually giving me a raise, which was pretty nice. But the door was shut. So then I come out and then she's like, oh, that's the office security lady. I'm like, what? I can't speak Spanish, so I'm just walk out and she's all looking at me laughing and I'm like, oh. Some other things that happen. Oh, just side note, if you guys don't have state minimum coverages on your insurance policy, that's just blatantly stupid. If you hit a Tesla, you're screwed. Don't do it. I always recommend 100, 300 or above. It's usually not that much more either. Sorry, that was kind of like a sales thing. Some other things that have happened. Salespeople give us donuts, and I absolutely love it. I gotta think, because most of it's over the phone, and usually it's not too crazy. A lot of people are just kind of like, they kind of just angry, and it's not that funny. Same thing with McDonald's. Like the craziest thing that happened there was their sandwich was messed up. So we go and remake it. And then she comes back and she's like, you did not remake this. This is the same sandwich. You just made it correctly. And then she threw it on the ground. She was crazy. I was like, what? I don't know. To be honest, I I forget a lot of the crazy stories that happen to me. I will always remember her because she'll call our text line, which can't take phones, and we'll see a notification. We'll be like, oh, and we know who to give it to since she's a client for a specific insurance agent. And then she'll call the office. And sometimes, again, that will last a while or that will last really quick. And she'll be like, oh, tomorrow I'm coming in. And then she doesn't come in tomorrow. So, yeah, we all remember her.
That's good. I mean, at least she sounds decent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she's not a bad person. She doesn't like well, it's funny. One moment she likes this person, one of the people she worked, my coworker, the one that works with her. Some moments she likes her, some moments she doesn't. And then, this is gonna sound really weird. Don't ever do this with a client. But we found her Facebook and we were going through that. She seems like a nice lady. She dresses like a young person, she's old. She does not dress like an old person. So that's weird for me to say, but she looks fine for someone. I think she's 70s.
Okay. So she says, yeah, I get it. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's the one I find most memorable is her.
That's cool. No, that's cool. I mean, I was expecting like all like manner of terrible stories, like this hell and this hell. But it sounds to me like, for the most part, well, one or two things. Either one, or maybe it's both. You haven't really had that many bad experiences, and when you have had them, you've just dealt with them in a good way. I suppose that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah, like generally a good attitude towards this stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to be like, oh, you're annoying, but hey, hey, buddy, we're gonna be friends for a moment. A lot of the times, I do give it to my boss because, again, I'm only 6 or 7 months into insurance, so I'm still pretty new to it.
Okay, so there's still time.
Yeah.
Are you cold calling people or no?
No, so my boss, we get so many mouth-to-mouth references, and then just based off how many clients he has a lot of clients. It's most of the time we don't need to, and a lot of people, like Progressive, they'll send people to our agency and we'll get quotes like that. So I have not seen my boss do it, or me personally. I know one of my coworkers, he does real estate and insurance, and he kind of uses insurance to promote his real estate and real estate to promote his insurance. He's a really smart guy in that aspect. And, I don't have to do any cold calling though. So that's nice.
That's good. That's good. What's the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
I was thinking about this, right? Because you've asked other people, and
I ask everyone.
Yeah. So initially I was going to say, hey, just take everything one step at a time, because otherwise you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to become a big YouTuber. And then you're not going to take the little steps that actually get you hopefully there. So I would say that. Then the other day I was just thinking of something else. I completely forgot it now, which makes me kind of upset, because, you're going to see other people suggest, hey, just take things one thing at a time. But I was kind of looking at something else and I'm like, ooh, that would be interesting. And now I forgot it and I'm sad. But yeah, I would say just take everything one step at a time. It's just simple. It keeps goals in proportion. And you don't beat yourself over if something's bad. You just go, oh, I worked on this. Once that's done, I should be good to move on to this. And from there, it just eventually builds up until it's something you like, or you end up in a career you like, or I don't know. It overall makes a good sequence, in my opinion, of how things work, and it keeps you going at it.
And that's a lesson specific to you, to your life.
To my life, yes. That's the only reason because like I said, I went by this, like I have this channel art, it's called Don't Let Art Become a Chore. And very much I just go, oh, I will work on this for this amount of time, or like I play Rocket League, and in order to get ranked, you have to do 10 matches of unranked play. And I go, oh, let's just do one match at a time. Eventually you've hit 10 and you're like, wow, I'm ranked. And I think it's something that is pretty important for people like me who have a hard time seeing long-term goals. Like, I don't know, like I'm never like, oh, my podcast is going to blow up. If it does, I'm like, awesome, but I never see it. So instead I'll focus on one thing at a time, making the podcast better, or I'll focus one thing in my career at a time. I'll learn Linux, and then I don't know, I need to learn more into IT, but just those little steps to kind of make something big. An artist, they go one line at a time, kind of. They kind of go like, I don't know. I don't draw.
No, dude, I think you're onto something here. Like, I obviously, yeah, it's something we've heard a million times, but I think it's very easy to lose sight of that. I know I do often. I've spoken about how I try and focus on making the content, but look, let's be real. This is a numbers game. Everything you do online, it's a numbers game. It's impossible to not care about it on some level, because it's I said this in a live stream once. I said it's the kind of the thing that we use to measure where we're going. Like you said, you're coming up to a 2-year anniversary, so naturally you're kind of going to look like, well, where have I gone in these 2 years? Like, what's the trajectory? Is it upwards? Is it flatlining? Is it going down? What's the pattern? Because patterns suggest things as well. It suggests, maybe I should do more of this, maybe I should do less of this. Like, for example, here's a really good thing to illustrate my point. I've done episodes of my podcast where it's just me talking. I prefer having guests on. I think it makes for a much better, entertaining podcast. Don't get me wrong. I think there's plenty of people out there that can make a good podcast with just them being on it. I've heard it, being executed. I just think generally it's more interesting to listen to two people talking, in my opinion. And I think, yeah. And when I've listened back to my podcast, the ones that I've done that are just me talking, I think I did a good job. I'm still proud of those episodes, but I just don't think they hold a candle to everything else that I've done. And look, this is not me trying to be like, oh, I'm high grade, look at all the stuff I've done. I'm just saying, by comparison, it's not in anywhere in the same league. And the stats kind of suggest that too. I mean, there have been some exceptions, but the exceptions have been for a reason. Like, for instance, I did an episode which was like 100th episode / anniversary 1 year, and naturally that's going to get more views because it's the 100th episode, but it was just me talking, and I've just noticed those episodes don't get as many views, and that's fair enough. It's not as good. It's not as interesting. I think it's, if people see the topic, maybe they kind of know what's coming. And I'm not going to stop doing those episodes, because sometimes they're necessary. I mean, you get no shows, it happens. You got to put something out there. Sometimes
we had scheduling issues.
Sure, no, and that's very common in podcasting. I'm just happy we managed to do something, because that's the thing, dude. Like, and I'll just say this as a side note, because I don't know if I've actually mentioned this on the show before. I get a lot of no shows, as I'm sure you have as well. It just happens in podcasting, and that's fine. If you're busy, fine, but there's something happens, reschedule. I mean, like, we've rescheduled, like you said, and it wasn't a problem. But communicate. You got to let people know, respect people's time. Like, I really respect people's time, because I don't want my time to be wasted. So, like, I'm not going to like leave you hanging for 15 minutes. I'm going to be there on time at the time we said we're going to record, and that's that. Because I don't want to waste people's time. And I get infuriated when I get my time wasted and then that person never gets back to me. And because I sit down, look, here's a whole page of notes I did just for this episode. It's like, I sit down, I do the research into that person, and then they don't have the respect to just, get back to me and be like, hey, can't do the podcast because of X, Y, and Z. Or, hey, like, and here's the thing, if you don't want to be on the show anymore, no problem, but let me know.
Exactly.
And
like a sword in the chest.
Yeah, it's just disrespectful. Don't waste people's time. But when things like that happen, I think you just have to kind of get used to it and understand it's part of the game. And some now I kind of tend to, if I have a no show or something like that, I just leave it a bit longer, because I haven't actually set an established day for uploading episodes. I've just kind of fallen into a kind of rhythm of once a week. That seems to, what I mean? I started in the beginning, it was loads to get the numbers, but it wasn't purposeful. It was just I had a lot of guests at that time. I'm actually heading into November where I'm going to have more guests as well. So I haven't really thought about it. I had some ideas. Maybe I do like a Christmas 12 days thing. And now I'm just like, I'll just do it and just see what happens. You do it but generally I prefer that kind of week by week thing. I feel like that's a good rhythm for me. It works in my life and it's less pressure because there's a lot, obviously, as you know, that goes into podcasting, and from editing to promo to everything. It's a process, and if there's too much, it can get a bit overwhelming. But I don't know. I think that it's one of those things. It's like anything else. It's you get what you put in, and I'm very proud of this podcast now. And anytime I see creators such as yourself, with the same passion, I want to kind of listen to them talk. I want to get to know them. I want to share that. And that's why, for instance, that guest I spoke about that didn't have the enthusiasm being on my show, it annoyed me because it's like, well, look, you're kind of sabotaging my show in a way, like not in like a, I'm sure they didn't mean to, but it's just
like people will look back on that episode and be like, oh, this is it, again, no hard feelings to that guy. I'm sure he's an interesting person.
He was, that's the thing. And I had good questions and I was really trying to get something out of it, but it goes back to the willingness thing. It's all about that. It's not about, like, one thing I try to do is make every guest I have feel comfortable and feel like they can talk and feel like, there's no agenda here. It's, you can talk as much as you want, as little as you want, whatever. As long as we get something out of this, then it's good. But that episode, I would regard that as my only bad episode, where I genuinely, even now, I'm like, should I release that? Should it stay there? I don't know. I've had some people mixed, people still listen to it and got something from it. But I think it's taught me a lesson that I probably won't, if I have another episode like that, I don't know, because I feel bad at the same time, because it's like an hour of someone's life, it's an hour of my life.
I've heard that some other podcasters, what they do is, I mean, some say that, I've heard that some people, like, they use a forum, they're like, hey, this might not make it onto the show. The actual form itself, I don't know if I'm a fan of that, but I think so, it could be worth, like, just going to having, like, this might not make it. I don't know. I have this same issue now.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about doing like a short version. I had this idea, because I'm always having ideas about how I could change my podcast and maybe, I don't know, spice things up, have a different format, something like that. I will always keep the spice. But keep it fresh, keep it different. Because one thing I really want to do is more discussion-based stuff. I'd love to have a co-host where, we talk and discuss topics, and that would be a different element to episodes. So you'd have like discussion episodes, and then you'd have interview episodes. And I thought about this idea of doing a hybrid. So like when those episodes that don't do well, or they're too short, maybe I splice it. So I have like half of it is me doing discussions on stuff and half of it is that interview. And I think maybe that's the solution, but I just don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. One step at a time. You try it and see. I don't know, but yeah, it's tricky. That's a tricky one, but it's hard to define what to do.
As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or maybe some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. Wow, edit that. If you enjoy listening to me, Linguini's Dough is my podcast. I am currently in the works of a new logo. I'm not a graphic designer, but I'm working on it. I have Illustrator open right here in front of me. And then I don't have a website necessarily. Like I have the Anchor website. I still need to make one. I see Christian has a link tree. So still in the works. But yeah, I'm figuring out what I want to put it as a niche as, I guess, because that is where I'm having the most difficulty is deciding what I want this to be about. But yeah, if you are interested, Linguini's Dough, just search it on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, whatever you listen on, should be there.
Excellent. Yeah, go out of your way to check that out, guys. Linguini's Dough. Thank you so much for being here, Landin. It's been a real pleasure. And I wish you all the best.
Yeah, ton of fun, Christian. Thanks again.
Thanks. And for everyone listening to the Christian Reeve podcast, as always, be safe, be well. I'll see you in the next one.